The 31st ASEAN Summit kicked off in Manila today as world leaders gathered to discuss various political, security and economic issues. Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte leading the ceremony as the host. The summit comes at a time when maritime security remains a key concern for all players in the region. There's growing threat of extremism and terrorism across the world. Nuclear non-proliferation is an important issue, as is the issue of migration, immigration as well. All these are expected to be discussed at the three-day summit that began this morning. The thorny issue of China's aggressive military maneuvers in the disputed South China Sea, North Korea's nuclear missile tests and overall security architecture in the region will also come up for discussion over the next 2 days. ASEAN leaders expected to adopt a number of declarations and statements that will provide impetus for national and regional actions meant to address these issues.
Thank you very much to His Majesty and their Excellency.
And with me in the studio is the former Indian ambassador to the US, Ambassador Arun Singh. Thank you very much once again for joining us here. We are looking ahead to the next big meeting, and that is between Donald Trump and Narendra Modi. And we know there's a whole host of issues that need to be discussed. But I think the biggest sticking point, as the two leaders come together and the countries come closer to each other, remains trade.
So yes, so trade would be among the issues discussed. Because the present US President has put a lot of focus on trade issues and bilateral trade imbalances, because earlier the US didn't focus on specific trade imbalances with particular countries. And they have identified that US trade imbalance with India is almost $30 billion in India's favor. And they feel that India is among the top 10 countries with which US has a trade imbalance. And they would like to see something done to address that through market access, more investment flows in both directions. India's position has been that you shouldn't look at trade imbalance just in a static sense. But going ahead, India is going to be buying more energy from the US, oil and gas. India is also going to be buying more aircraft for civilian travel in India, and they'll be buying it from the US. There are already existing orders of more than 200 aircraft. So if we look at the future of the economic relationship, clearly the engagement will grow and India would be buying more and more from the US. Therefore, one should address this issue in a forward-looking manner rather than just the current context. But the US approach is different. You may have noticed that yesterday, for example, the Prime Minister of Singapore, after the meeting of APEC, had said that while most other countries keep looking at the multilateral approach to trade imbalances, the present US administration is focused on bilateral trade imbalances. And therefore, this is clearly something that we will need to look at. There was a meeting of the India-US Trade Policy Forum at the end of October in Washington, D.C., where our Commerce Minister had gone. And the sense in Washington was that not much progress could be made in this, because there was a slight difference between the US and Indian approach, with the US focusing on present imbalance and India wanting to look at it in a forward-looking manner. So I think this will be an issue that needs to be addressed. And also, if India and US are to consolidate their strategic partnership, the economic dimension has to be strengthened further. So they need to look at it that going ahead, how do we partner in new areas of economic activity? And in that framework, I'd like to draw your attention also to the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, which is going to be
later this year.
Later this month.
A month, exactly.
And that will be done in Hyderabad. And the daughter of US President Ivanka Trump would be leading the US delegation. Our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, would be leading the Indian delegation, showing the importance that both countries attach to this. And the focus there is on innovation and entrepreneurship. And in India, we are today putting a lot of attention on startups, on innovation. And it is innovation and entrepreneurship that will create the new industries, create new patterns of work going ahead, and create new pattern of economic interlinkages. And I think these are the ways we should look at addressing the trade and economic links between the two countries.
Right. Strategic convergence and common interests and issues is something that will also be coming up, of course. And a lot is being said about China. But there's another neighbor, that is Afghanistan, on which America is focusing on, and they want a larger role for India. We've seen high-profile visits from Tillerson to James Mattis. So is that going to come up? And what sort of approach do you see New Delhi taking in the months ahead when it comes to Afghanistan?
I think Afghanistan is bound to come up. President Trump had made a major pronouncement on Afghanistan on August 21, And three elements in that were of interest to India. First, a signal that the US is going to increase its troop presence in Afghanistan and will stay on a conditions-based approach, and that there is no time limit to their presence. So that would be a signal to Pakistan, to Taliban, that they're there for the long haul. Second, an expectation that US is going to increase the pressure on Pakistan to take action against terrorist groups. But in the past, we have found that Pakistan has managed to deflect similar pressure by providing some cooperation on specific instances and buying time. And recently, Pakistan worked with the US to get a Canadian-American couple that was held hostage by the Haqqani network to be released. And therefore, after that, President Trump tweeted that I'm having an excellent working relationship with the leadership of Pakistan. So we need to assess that this pressure that is sought to be or had been projected would be put on Pakistan on the subject of terrorism. Where does it stand now and going ahead? And third, the President had said that he would approach Afghanistan in the context of a South Asia strategy. Now, what does that mean? What would be the role of India? What are the expectations from India? What would be the space for India to play a more active role in Afghanistan? So these are among the issues that I think our leaders would want to understand from the US President, how things have evolved since August 21.
Right. And of course, China. So while he was in China, while Donald Trump was in China, he praised the Chinese president. I think he was just being a good guest. Then he leaves China, goes to Vietnam, praises Narendra Modi and slams China for a lot of issues. Has America given a clear signal where it sees India and China in a strategic equation in this region? Is it putting all its eggs in one basket and backing India here, or still playing the diplomatic game?
So, very often people have said that countries and institutions adopt a good cop, bad cop strategy. Somebody plays the good cop, somebody plays the bad cop. And here the difference is that President Trump plays both the bad cop and good cop himself. Sometimes the good cop, sometimes the bad cop. So with China, he is signaled differently. Sometimes demanding from China that it approach trade issues differently, not follow predatory economic and trade policies. Sometimes signaling that he has an excellent working relationship with President Xi. He's looking forward to China's cooperation in dealing with the problem of North Korea. And I think his basic approach is that also use positive language to encourage cooperation, but try and sustain pressure. And so I think it's not a question of either or when he looks at India and China. And no country in the world really looks at its other relationship in an either or context. Each one tries to maximize equations, links, so as to serve their national interests. So they would be looking at their relationship with China, what kind of trade and economic links to build, what kind of political cooperation to generate. But at the same time, what are the other relationships you build to generate pressure on China so that some of the negative orientations in Chinese policies can be sustained. And so in that context, I think they see that India is not adversarial to the United States. India, there are similarities in values. In terms of democracy. India, the security concerns of India, and you may recall that that US Secretary of State Tillerson on October 18 had said that India's security concerns are US security concerns. Now that's a very significant statement. So they see a lot of convergence in the interest between India and the US. So they will try and build this relationship to generate pressure on China while also maintaining an outreach to China and consolidating the relationship with China. So I don't think we should expect an either or. And you don't see an either or even in the context of India and Pakistan. That they have good relations with India, but they want to maintain the link with Pakistan.
Indeed. Ramesh Ramachandran, WION's international correspondent tracking developments in Manila, joining us this afternoon. Ramesh, the meeting between Donald Trump and Narendra Modi, I assume, has been delayed. It was supposed to begin at 1 p.m. India time.
Indeed, Palki, it was scheduled to begin at 1 p.m. India time or 3:30 p.m. Manila time, and I would gather that the meeting would have begun by now. I'm a little far removed from the venue of that meeting, but I'm given to understand that meeting would have begun on time, given the logistical nightmare organizing such bilateral on the margins of summits. But that said, I want to make a couple of quick points, Palki. I was listening into the conversation Ambassador Singh was making when you talk about the ASEAN and the Indo-Pacific region. region, one can't but ignore China. China is undoubtedly the elephant in the room. But that said, as they say in diplomacy, you can make new friends, but you can't change your neighbors. So I'm not too sure whether India would have factored all of it in before it decided to join issue and join hands with the US, Japan and Australia in the Quad. Now, as they say, India's position on the Doklam standoff has not gone unnoticed in the ASEAN region. But the fact remains that there is an asymmetry even within the Quad, given the fact that both Japan and Australia are treaty allies of the US. They both have the luxury of living under the American nuclear umbrella. But India does not have that luxury. So therefore, I would reason and reckon that India needs to maybe go back to the drawing board, as it were, and factor in all of these factors before deciding to plunge headlong into this quadrilateral, because this might have consequences, some known, some unknown, in the days and months and years to come. So I would wait and watch, as they say, and we have given to understand that this is a work in progress. So I guess India is also taking it slowly but surely and trying to get its act together in the Indo-Pacific region.
Right, and according to reports, there was a pull aside yesterday at the gala dinner, and Modi and Trump exchanged some words. And this is their first meeting after 5 months when the Indian Prime Minister visited the US. Do we know what was said? And what are your sources in the Foreign Ministry telling you specifically about the agenda?
Well, Palki, this is not being described as a pull-aside. This can at best be described as an informal conversation. It's only natural when heads of state and government meet in an informal setting, such as a gala dinner under the same roof. They will naturally rub shoulders with each other. They will have their usual handshakes and hugs, warm hugs and convivial conversations. So that is what happened last night here in Manila, when all the heads of state and government dressed in the Philippine national costume, the barong for the men and the Filipiniana for the women, mingled together in an informal setting. And we saw those pictures of Prime Minister Modi interacting with President Trump, Prime Minister Trudeau, Prime Ministers Abe and Turnbull of Australia, and a host of other leaders. So this was more an informal getting to know each other on the margins of a summit. But the actual discussions will happen in the bilaterals. And significantly, Palki, from India's perspective, although the Quad did meet yesterday, Prime Minister Modi will not elevate that relationship to the political level just yet, choosing instead to meet all the leaders separately for bilaterals, namely President Donald Trump of the US, Prime Minister Abe of Japan and Prime Minister Turnbull of Australia. So that said, India does not want to elevate this the buzz around the Quad just yet to the political level. It will wait and watch and see how things pan out before deciding on its next course of action.
Right, Ramesh, stay with us while we chase all these sound bites and the meetings of the world leaders. We'd also like to tell our viewers what is ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It's celebrating the 50th anniversary this time.